Hello and welcome to Restore the Real. I am your host, Dr. Randy Michaud, and you are in for a treat today. We have got a exciting topic. It's going to challenge some of the narratives that you may have about health and how that happens and what causes disease. And a lot of this came from a presentation that Dr. Jay Davidson gave at ECO, the conference put on by Cellcore Biosciences back in 2020 during a challenging time in many of our lives, maybe all of our lives. And with me to go through this topic and have fun with this is Dr. Nick Ellenson. Dr. Nick, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's going to be a fun topic and definitely one that may ruffle a few feathers, but it's intended to help with being able to learn and grow because with everything that happened the last few years, it's definitely, I feel like, challenged a lot of things and forced us to dive deeper and understand things at a much different level. So it's going to be a fun topic.
Yeah. So one of the things that stood out to me most in that presentation was he shared the story of, and this is recent. This is not like, 100 years ago. This is as recent as 2016. Actually, it goes back to 2012. But a Dr. Stefan Lanka in I believe the UK, he's a virologist, and he put forth a challenge saying that um, the measles virus, the measles vaccine, sorry, measles virus had never been actually isolated. And that anybody that could show research proving that there was a actual measles virus, that he would give them 100,000 euros. And so you can imagine the frenzy then that could take place of now people putting forth research to try to disprove this. And another scientist quickly presented 6 papers and said, "Here it is. Give me my $100,000. I proved that here's the virus." And Stefan Lanka said, "No, there's no proof there. I'm not paying." They went to court. The first court ruled against Dr. Lanka, saying, "Yeah, this is proven." Dr. Lanka didn't accept that. He appealed it and went to another court. They ruled in Dr. Lanka's favor. It then went to another court, this high court, and they had multiple other scientists, researchers, doctors on that panel. And after looking at the data, they said, "We rule in favor of Dr. Lanka. There's no proof here of the measles virus." What do you want to share in addition to that?
Yeah, it's um, for one, the boldness of Stefan Lanka to go out there and challenge that and even offer up his own money to basically challenge the concept of a virus. So it's very, very bold on his part to even step into that arena and come back to the results that he was never able to have anybody who's been able to prove, even in court, that viruses are the cause, in this case, of measles. So when you start looking at that, really makes you question about the concept of a virus and if they are true or real in how they've been portrayed, even more so these last few years with, again, the virus being such a disruptor of basically everybody's life. And so it's it is very interesting in that it does make you start to question the validity of everything that we've been taught when it comes to viruses.
Yeah. And so, really, what we're going to dive in today with that bombshell right there is we're going to dive into germ versus terrain theory and hit on what it is, what was accepted, maybe why it was accepted. But before we get into that, going back to this, Dr. Lanka was never saying that the symptoms didn't exist or that the condition didn't exist. What he was saying is that it's never been proven that a virus is the cause of the disease, or that the virus has even been isolated, as many people have said that we think of viruses as the cause, and we talk about the measles virus, we talk about the flu virus, we talk about all these different viruses, the C word virus that was there. But in actuality, none of these viruses have ever been isolated based on what were called Koch's postulates. And Dr. Koch was a scientist, and he put forth these postulates on what it would take to prove that something caused a disease. And Dr. Nick, I'll go over the first postulate, and pretty much the first postulate, it makes it next to impossible to show that any bacteria or virus is actually causing a disease. And the first postulate that he put forth was microorganisms, or the microorganism, must be found in abundance in all organisms suffering from the disease. And that those organisms then should not be in a healthy organism.
Yep. And it should be more than just one person. It should be a big, large group of people that should have the exact same symptoms, exact same microorganisms in them.
Right. And so this has not been able to actually be proven with any viruses or bacteria. It doesn't stand up, which is crazy to think that, wow, these were his initial postulates, and not a single bacteria, virus stands that test. You had some other things on his postulates. Do you want to go through the things that you had as well?
Yeah, so again, going further into the postulate, so the microorganism, so it must be isolated from the diseased organism and then be able to be grown in a pure culture. So you should be able to isolate it and grow it in a cultured medium so that, again, you are isolating that specific microorganism to be able to prove that that is what is making the people sick in that first group. And then from there, you should be able to take that isolated organism and infect that into a host that is not sick. It's a healthy host. And then you should be able to re isolate that organism from that previous group that you had infected with that specific microorganisms. And again, as you mentioned, they're never able to actually prove or follow through with this postulate because when you are putting these bacteria into a healthy host, there's nothing there for them to basically feed on, so there's no way for them to grow and basically cause the same disease or symptoms as that first infected group. So this again, this is it's one of those things that took me a while to understand, and sometimes it helps to have an example to put things into perspective. So one example that I'd seen that as I was digging into this that I thought was really good, that again helps to understand this better. So this is a milk example that I'd seen. So So there's a group of people that drank milk from a cow, and all of a sudden this group had bloody diarrhea. And of course, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out why people were having diarrhea. And so with trying to figure that out, start looking at the milk and find this bacteria that's in there that is not found in normal healthy or the usual milk or normal healthy milk. And then again, taking it a step further, should be able to, in the infected people, be able to find that same bacteria inside them that is again causing, or it's the same as the milk, same in the person that's causing the bloody diarrhea. And so therefore, when that is found, that again going, this is basically on the germ theory, is that when you're isolating that specific bacteria in the milk in the person who is sick, therefore it's the bacteria that is causing the problem. Now, when you try to fulfill Cook's postulate, so again, we found the bacteria in the milk, found the bacteria in the person that had all the symptoms, and then you should be able to isolate that from the person and then infect that into a healthy host, no symptoms. And when you infect them with that listeria bacteria, it should cause the same bloody diarrhea symptoms that the first group had. Now, it doesn't happen. And so it's like, okay, what the heck? Why is the listeria in that first group causing symptoms, but when you isolate it, put that into a healthy host, they don't get sick or have bloody diarrhea? And so when you start looking at things and breaking things down, and again, this is even where some of the concepts of the terrain theory start to come in to help with explaining things, where there's, I feel like, some holes in the germ theory, is that you got to look at the health of the cow. So understanding where that milk is coming from, that as to understanding why that bacteria was there in the first place. And so you start looking into things and find out that the cow had been injected with different vaccines, antibiotics, sat in a building all day, didn't get out in the sun, didn't get access to fresh grass. So normal things that a normal healthy cow would get access to, right? Grazing grass, um, and fresh water, all those things. And so you start looking at, okay, the cow being exposed to all these things, and being fed grain that was been sprayed with glyphosate, atrazine, all these different pesticides, herbicides, and again, being fed grain, which is not a natural diet for a cow. So all these things start building up inside the cow, and all of a sudden the cow is not producing healthy milk anymore. And so because that second person, or the healthy host that was injected with the listeria, it's missing that component of the milk that is from the unhealthy cow. It doesn't grow because there's no growing environment for that bacteria. So when it comes down to it, again, if the host is healthy, you can't get sick because the same toxins aren't there for the bacteria to break down. And this goes into why bacteria are even there, is to help with breaking things down. So I know there's a lot there, so might need to back up and kind of unpack a few things there.
Yeah. So it sounds like so what we're saying and why we're bringing this topic up right now is because it's really easy to fear germs.
Mhm.
It's really easy to fear viruses. There have been something like 160 movies made about a virus or a germ that's going
Pandemic.
to plague mankind and that we have to be afraid of it. And the only thing that's going to protect you from that is a man made antidote. And that everyone's going to die unless you get this antidote. And anybody that brings up any other alternative um, option for healing is in those movies ruled like a heretic. They are just, they're defrauded, they're told that they're liars, and in the movies they're proved, yeah, they were wrong all along. And so it's putting forth a message over and over and over again: fear bacteria, fear viruses, fear your environment. And what we've seen over the past 4 years is almost this: you have to sterilize everything. And I think people are waking up to the fact that maybe that wasn't what was needed or what should have ever been done, but that it created so much fear. And as a result, there is isolation. And you still hear people talk about being afraid that they're going to catch a certain virus because of the ramifications of that, as if we can catch it. And I remember that, in chiropractic school, one of my professors would talk about flu season. And he would say, it's as if this boat is docking on every shore in the country and it's unleashing the virus that's going to sweep across the US and plague all of us unless we get a jab to protect us from that. And he was like, guys, it's always here. It never goes away. It's in you, it's in each of you. And it's not something that you're going to catch. And so, with what you just shared, one group got sick, one group didn't. Why? Well, so much of it was based on the health of the cow, not because they caught something, but because of the environment in which they lived, and the things that they were not exposed to: sunlight, fresh water, grass, instead given this diet of garbage laced with chemical. And of course, it changed their insides so that then the milk that they produced was less than stellar, toxic in many degrees. And then the people that drank that maybe had a less than stellar environment themselves in the body and developed the sickness, whereas people that were robust health didn't. And so this comes right into germ theory versus terrain theory. And there's still a lot of people that may not know the difference, that don't know that there was ever any debate or maybe some manipulation of data or out and out lies to push a certain agenda. Um, and so let's go there. I mean, well, Dr. Nick, is there anything else you want to say about what we just talked about? Unpacking anything that you know want to share about that?
Yeah, so Cook's postulate again that was designed to be a template and to be able to basically prove whatever disease that somebody was having was caused by XYZ bacteria, virus. And so it's a way to basically have a scientific approach on how to prove or disprove the causation of whatever it is. Now, one interesting thing as you start digging into Cook's postulate and trying to basically prove viruses' existence, all of a sudden you get some basically watering down of these postulates. So, kind of the next famous one is Rivers' postulate, which cuts out, I believe it's step one in Cook's postulate. And then from there, I don't remember the names off the top of my head. There's even other ones that have been developed basically that are essentially weaker in my mind as far as being able to follow a specific way, like Cook had postulated, um, and basically watered these postulates down in order to basically prove that viruses cause people to be sick. So yeah, that's very interesting. Again, just looking back over the years of history on how things have gotten to be where they are today. That's one of the things that's essentially been watered down is Cook's original postulate, um, in the isolation of bacteria or viruses has essentially been watered down. Um, so so yeah, it's um, I don't know. It's just interesting how things get changed in order to basically prove one way or another over the years.
Well, and and we saw that with this most recent pandemic that hey, it's totally safe and effective. Well, it may hurt a few people. Well, maybe you don't want kids to have it. Well, maybe it did cause a couple deaths. And then most recently, there was a study that just came out. I'll have to link that in here that showed that 75% of deaths after the jab were actually caused by the jab. And so data changes, right? And there's a watering down of the language that's used. And it's all you know, like the Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain, just focused on the big talking head and be in fear because we're in control. And until you start to pull the curtain back, it's like, oh, wait, he's just a little old man making, all these claims and causing us to fear when there was really nothing to fear in the first place. Now, are we saying that disease doesn't exist and that symptoms don't arise? Absolutely not. Like we are in the trenches working with people with chronic illness. But what we have to look at is why did that start, right? And if it is all based on a bacteria making someone sick or a virus making someone sick, then theoretically it would make sense that cool, then a medication, a bacteria, an antibiotic, a vaccine is then going to nullify that. But we don't actually see that in reality. And this then leads to talking about actual germ and terrain theory. And you have to go back to Louis Pasteur, who many people learn of. Well, I don't know if they learn about him in school anymore. Um, and Antoine Béchamp, who definitely really nobody has ever heard about because his theory was not the one that sees the day, not the one that would have made the headlines. Um, Louis Pasteur's did. And so they were both um, scientists, right? Well, one was a little bit more of a lot more of a scientist than the other. And in many instances, Louis Pasteur was, um,
Maybe more of a better marketer than a true
yeah, maybe a
scientist.
better marketer than an actual scientist. Actually, stole a lot of Antoine Béchamp's data. But anyway, you go back to, I believe, early. I'm going to get my dates wrong on here. Probably early 1900s. And they're looking under a microscope, right? They're looking at bacteria, they're looking at other organisms. And Louis Pasteur theorized that these microbes that he was seeing under a microscope, that they were the cause of disease. They were to be feared. They were, um, that was it, that a bacteria led to a disease and that because of that, we need to fear these microbes.
Yep.
Antoine Béchamp was very different. Do you want to share about his what he theorized and some of the work that he did?
Yeah. So Bouchamp basically carried out in a continuation of Claude Bernard was the guy who he worked with and furthered some of his work that he was doing. But he believed that the terrain or the environment determined our state of health, basically. So how healthy our bodies are dictated how healthy we are. And basically, um, through or basically the one of the big concepts he talks about is pleomorphism. So we all have these commensal bacteria, meaning that they're kind of in the middle. They're necessarily not good nor bad. They're 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 right in the middle. And so we all have these quote unquote bad bacteria inside of us all at the same or all the time. So you have staph, you have strep, you have E. coli, you have H. pylori. Again, all these seemingly bad parasite or bacteria. And so we, again, depending upon the health of our bodies, our environment, our terrain, can dictate whether those are stay commensal or they go pathogenic, depending upon the different stressors or toxins. I feel like is probably the biggest driver of why there's that pleomorphic change. Pleomorphism basically is a fancy term for meaning many forms. So you have, again, the non-pathogenic forms and you have the more pathogenic forms. And depending upon the environment is going to dictate how the bacteria are pleomorphing, are changing forms. And so
So
basically,
really quick, sorry to interrupt. That is such an important point to hit on, that these different forms, right? I love the cartoon X-Men growing up, right? They look like normal people, and then all of a sudden they have like these superpowers where they can mutate into like this superhero.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, it's kind of similar that these bacteria, viruses, fungi, that they have one form that could be on one hand complete in harmony with the body,
mm-hmm,
working for us, working for our benefit. And then in a moment, because of toxicity, environmental toxicity, stress, trauma, they
lack of
can
sleep.
suddenly change, right? And now they become virulent, and now they're toxic to the body. And that's a really important thing to recognize, because that does really state the importance of how our internal environment and how we adapt to stress and how we take caution of the things that we put into our body, what we eat, what we drink, what we sleep, what we think, what we do. Like that becomes so important if that is what's driving the changes in these pathogens.
So yeah, it's very, very much more empowering of in that we have the ability to essentially take the reins when it comes to our health and how healthy we are, and that versus kind of the germ theory is that we're almost essentially broken, that in that we need these external things in order to be healthy, to combat these bacteria or viruses. And so it's a very much a very opposite sides approach. And again, the more I dug into things, the more the terrain view or theory made much more sense to me as I started to understand it versus the germ theory. In that, um, I mean, you look at the EPA and how many toxins have been made. It's like over 86,000 different toxins. There's like 45,000 that are in use. And you start looking at that as, and we are exposed to way more toxins than ever before. And again, it kind of matches with a lot of the health trends, is we're way more health issues than ever before. So it's one of those things that just makes sense to me in, again, trying to understand why somebody is having all these health issues and health crises, and again, everything that we can be exposed to on a daily basis as a big driver of that.
Yeah. You know what's interesting with that? If you go back to like kind of both of them, both of those, and thinking of the the responsibility aspect in each individual, and also which one would make the bigger headline, right? If you imagine today with social media, X, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all these things, which one would have made the bigger splash? I mean, to me, clearly, germ theory would have made the bigger splash. Oh my gosh, I found it. Bacteria are what are causing disease, right? Could you imagine that headline today? I mean, well, we can think of what's happened in the past 4 years. Here are the headlines. Here's what this is causing: mass panic, be afraid, wear a mask, isolate, don't go outside, put yourself in a bubble, sanitize everything, don't talk to your neighbors, don't go to church, don't do anything,
Stay
right?
6 feet away.
Stay 6 feet away, right? And that made the bigger headline. And so even back in the day when these two contemporaries were theorizing the cause of what they saw under the microscope, the one would clearly make the bigger splash, because then with that, here comes salvation saying, oh, and now I have the antidote for that, right? Take my antidote and you'll live, right? Clearly, that makes the bigger one. Who wants to hear the message? Many people do, but who really wants to hear the message of personal responsibility, of you're responsible for your health? You are in control of your health. I think many people will say, well, I want that control, right? I want to be free to do what I want to do. But then when you actually give people that responsibility, I mean, it's like life hits you in the face. Oh, I actually have to go to sleep at a certain time. I need to eat a certain way. I need to exercise. I need to, maybe have these practices that are helping to keep me present and out of fear or anxiety. I mean, those are going to happen, but a lot of that stuff, to actually be conscious of health, takes responsibility. And I don't know if these two scientists were trying to even, if that was even a thought at a time. But as I think about it, one is there's no responsibility. You can't do anything. And the other is complete responsibility, where it's on you to determine your health. And are we still going to get sick? I mean, if you're listening to my voice, you clearly know that it's not the same as it normally is, and that there's something going on. Is it because I caught something? No, it's probably because I slept in an airport last week, didn't get much sleep, came back Sunday night late, got to bed at 1 a.m., woke up, came into the office, and then there have been some other things going on this week that have been a little stressful. Yeah, there's something going on in my body, but I
So just
don't.
to break that down, there's two big stresses there. One, lack of sleep,
Yep.
and two, lots of stress. With both of those incidences, the not getting enough or having flight change issues and sleeping in an airport and stressors during the week. So there's some two big things. As you were talking, there's like, okay, there's definitely some reasons why the throats or the voice is a little funny.
Yeah, and so it's has it affected my internal terrain and microbiome? Absolutely, right. So we got to do things too. I slept in this morning. I, did some other things, some red light to try to. But anyway, we'll get into that in the next part of this. But I find it fascinating, all of the all the levels that these two theories hit. And from an emotional standpoint, a health freedom standpoint, personal responsibility, it's really interesting, just what implications they have, and and then what do we do with that? Right? They're still both theories. And we're not telling you what to believe or what not to believe. Clearly, we're both biased towards one versus the other. But
And part of that is we hope that it challenges you to do some more research to really fully understand this even deeper.
yeah, dig into the links, right? This is maybe one of the first podcasts where I've got links in, and I plan to do more of that as we go forward. But dig into the links that we provided. It's pretty, and they're all still active. I checked on all of them last night. There were some that were no longer active. Um, there are reasons for that too, but we won't go there. Um, but yeah, dig into these links on your own if you're really like if you're challenged by what we're saying. Um, the last place we want to go in this part is you may be thinking, okay, so are you saying that bacteria don't exist? Viruses don't exist? What are you exactly saying? I would say, no, we're not saying that these things don't exist. We're just saying that there's more to disease than catching a bug and then that making us sick.
Yeah,
And
I think part of that is kind of coming at it and looking at it as kind of that cause cause effect way of looking at things. So the cause of somebody getting sick is because they've been exposed to a bacteria. With a germ theory versus a terrain view, the bacteria showing there is a symptom. It's not the cause. The cause is, again, you've had some stressful things going on in your environment or to your terrain. So, whether, again, that's toxin driven, that's stress, lack of sleep, trauma, all these things are more the symptom or the cause leading to that, again, that pleomorphic genic nature of bacteria to therefore cause the symptoms of the bacteria overgrowing. And then I feel like one thing that people maybe don't understand too is that bacteria, when they are causing a lot of the symptoms, a lot of that's because they're producing their own set of toxins. They're essentially pooping and peeing as they're breaking things down. And that's one of bacteria's roles in nature. Fungus too is to break things down. So when we eat something, we naturally have to go to the bathroom afterwards. Bacteria do the same. They eat something, then they have to go to the bathroom, and they're releasing a lot of those toxins that they're making or breaking down, and leading to a lot of the symptoms. So, as Dr. Randy said, it's not that we're saying that these bacteria don't exist; they clearly do. And again, it's just understanding the or looking at things from a different perspective on why they're there.
and then it could kind of touch on this, maybe this last point. We have kind of 2 points left we want to hit on. Is there are things produced in the body by bacteria, by parasites, by our own body called exosomes, right? And exosomes are defined as extracellular vesicles that can be caused by stress. Had some of that this past week. Injury, um, toxins, microorganisms like bacteria, like fungi, radiation, and these exosomes are communicating messages into the body, and they can elicit responses. Right? They will cause cell communicators, cytokines, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, all these different chemical mediators in the body to accelerate, and many of those are inflammatory, meaning they are causing disease process. They will cause things like cell breakdown. They will cause inflammation to occur where there's more histamine release, which histamine release then can create more reactivity in the body in excess. It can cause trigger us to be sensitive to the world around us, smells, food, but that these exosomes may be more of the cause of disease and how our body is interpreting that stress. And then these exosomes are produced in the body, they proliferate. They then, again, release these different cytokines. And maybe that is what's causing disease in the body versus a bacteria or a virus.
Yeah,
What are your
and
thoughts on that?
yeah, it's interesting when you start diving into the concept of trying to look at things from an exosome standpoint or a virus standpoint. You look at the two, and they are the exact same size. You start digging into research on exosomes, and there is research on, seemingly seems like just about everything, stimulating a release or themselves producing exosomes. So there's research on antibiotics inducing exosome release. There's studies on different bacteria um, causing exosome release, parasites causing exosome release, fungus producing exosome release. And going back to the size, the other thing that is interestingly the same size as a virus, is mold spores. So again, it brings up the question of, when they're looking at a virus, are they actually really looking at a virus, or is it something else? So yeah, the concept of exosomes is very interesting once you start digging into there. And one of the things that, as trying to um, understand them more, is that they are basically, or can be, communication molecules, and that, again, trees can produce exosomes, animals can produce exosomes, and again, as you mentioned, they're essentially communication molecules. So example of that is, say there's a neighbor that's maybe spraying some glyphosate in the yard. All of a sudden, the plants in that area, the trees in that area, start releasing exosomes to the other trees close by. Hey, there's this chemical that is being sprayed. Basically, protect yourself from these toxins. So it is it's an interesting concept, or interesting to start looking at things again from a little bit different perspective. As are 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 we really seeing viruses, or are we just seeing exosomes?
Yeah. And then if we take that another level, then we have the energetic and the frequency component of all this. When we talk about frequency, right, you pick up signals from a radio tower, you pick up signals on the TV. It all happens like over this quantum field. And and then what do we exude? Right. So people that will often challenge this is like, yeah, well, I caught a cold from, my son went to school. I came home. I got the same exact thing. Well, is it what we think it is? Or is it the culmination of just even how the body's transmitting energy? This happens in forests, as you just talked about, the trees, plants, they communicate to each other, which is just fascinating. Do we not do the same thing? Does our energetic field interact with someone else's energetic field? And just to kind of make that point, do you ever notice, and actually not do you ever, when do you notice someone coming into your space? Someone's coming up behind you. How do you know they're there? You just kind of energetically feel like something's coming, and you turn around and it's like, oh, they may be a foot away. They could be 6 feet away. They could be 10 feet away, depending on what that field is. But their energy coming into your space is recognized. That's frequency. And so when we get into even that realm, I think it's fascinating of what do we transmit to others, and what is our energetic field? How are we all interacting together? And whether we are healing together or getting sick together, or um, or any other aspect, any other emotion, can we influence others? And I believe the answer is yes. When you walk into a room where everyone's happy, it can be really hard not to all of a sudden get a smile on your face. You walk into a room where everyone is angry, it's very easy to get caught up in that and be angry too. And you're like, wait, why am I even angry? I was fine a minute ago. So this terrain theory, I think, really has so many far reaching effects. And I think I love this concept because it does put responsibility back on us
Mhm.
to eat, drink, think, sleep, and do what is going to most benefit and uplift our body and help us see the light within us, help us see the love that's within us, as opposed to try to sucking from, other people. It is on us. So with all this talk of things, what then is the role of fungi and bacteria and viruses? We've hit on that a little bit, but they do have a role, right? Often when I'm talking to people, I'm one-on-one, and Dr. Nick, you do this too, in your one-on-one coaching, this comes up, and people will ask the question of, what are these bacteria doing to me, and when are we going to kill them, and when are we going to get rid of them from the body? And sometimes people will kind of taken aback when I'm like, are we though? Is that the real goal? Do we want to kill all of these things in the body? Or do we want to create harmony in the body where they all get along and where we actually have to just more get rid of toxicity and maybe the excess versus trying to like napalm everything in the body? So when we talk about these fungi, bacteria, and viruses, do they each have specific roles? And if so, like let's start with fungi. What are their roles in the body? Because this is really important for people to know, like just how essential these things are for us. They're not to be feared. They're not to try to kill. It's how do we be in harmony?
Yeah. So fungus, I find, again, are there to, and same with bacteria, they're there to break things down. So with fungus, a few things that I've seen correlations with from, again, working with lots of people. So mold, um, being exposed to mold tends to be a big driver of other fungus, yeast candida, um, heavy metal exposure, um, um, radioactive element exposure. Obviously, there can be a diet component, eating too much of the sweets and sugars. Those can obviously be a driver of fungus. And again, they're there to break things down. So again, where some of the interesting connections have been is as somebody has started to focus more on detoxing heavy metals, all of a sudden seeing this big flare up of yeast candida symptoms. And of course, the question is where is that yeast candida flare coming from? Is it that they got exposed to some yeast candida and cause the overgrowth in the body, or is it because there is the heavy metals that are being mobilized from deeper down in the body, and fungus doing its job to help with breaking things down, trying to help with facilitating, or maybe it was just a little bit too much too quick on the pushing the detox, which led to the overgrowth. But big thing is that, again, there's usually a reason why things happen in the body, and this is just one of those examples that I've seen, where heavy metals can trigger fungal flare-ups. And again, it's a sign that, one, there's clearly a heavy metal issue in the body, and two, there's other things going on that are, one, facilitating that breakdown, but also in the same sense can cause some issues. So you may need to address some of that overgrowth to help with symptom management. But yeah, ultimately the role of fungus is to break things down. You go outside and you have a tree that's fallen down in the woods. You see it covered with fungus. The fungus is there to break down that log, turn it back into soil, and again continue that circle of life, turn it into healthy soil so other plants can grow into it. Um, so,
So yeah, so that's fungi. When we look at bacteria, as you said earlier, these are agents of digestion, right? When you hear about the microbiome and the diversity of bacteria, why are they there? Well, they're breaking down one, dead tissue. They help to break down toxicity. They biodegrade poisons. So those are really important, right? Now,
mhm.
as you said with the fungi, right? What if we get too much toxicity in us? What if we get too much poison in us? Say too much glyphosate or too much of a chemical. Well, then can the bacteria kind of start to override the body? Yeah, it can. And then that will create symptoms. So do you ignore the bacteria? Not necessarily. But do you want to kill all of it? No, because if we kill it, then there's going to be some major ramifications, and you see that with antibiotic use, right? Antibiotics have been given out like candy for decades, and now you have all these strains of antibiotic resistant bacteria. You think they might have pleomorphed? You think they might have changed their nature to where at one time they were working for us, and now because they've been napalmed to death, now they're not. Now they're just trying to survive and create their own environment where they can thrive, and they're resistant to these things. So yeah, they can be a problem, but they're not the cause of the problem. There's something before. It's like, what was the toxin that created that? What was the stressor? What was the change in environment? And maybe you start looking at, was there a trauma? Was there a death in the family? Was there a move? Was there a job change? Was there a school change? Someone being bullied? I mean, there's so many things you could look at to identify like what may have caused this to happen rather than, oh, we got to kill the bacteria, right? That's not the solution. If it was, we'd all be 100% healthy and there'd be no heart disease or cancer or anything here in our environment because we'd all be healthy. But clearly we're not. We are one of the least healthy and most obese countries in the world, maybe if not the obese country in the world. So then last, right, we started out talking about viruses. Have viruses actually, do they exist? Do they not exist? On some level, yeah, they are in the body. And what do these do? What is their exact role in the body?
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier is I feel like viruses, exosomes, they're basically soaps or messengers. So when we get exposed to something, it's there to help with biodegrading those poisons and toxins, and helping to clear them from the body. There seems to be a messenger component to them within the body and even from body to body or plant to plant, to help with communicating between each other. So there definitely seems to be a role with them. And again, I feel like, um, even one thing that we haven't discussed yet that I feel like is very important topic to discuss when it comes to, again, kind of differentiating between the concepts of a virus and an exosome is that viruses are a lot of times thought of that they are alive, and a virus is not alive. It doesn't have a nucleus. It isn't able to do respiration. And so when you understand that, then that was kind of one of those things that again is never really talked about. And I feel like people don't understand And you start hearing about all these different things that get thrown out that they're killing the viruses, and that's why people are getting well. And again, when you learn that a virus is not alive, it's like, okay, what are these things actually doing then?
What are we killing?
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to antiviral even supplements, I have a different approach to them in trying to understand the mechanisms of how they work. So one, does it help with um, going after different bacteria that have antimicrobial properties to it? Does it have antiparasitic properties? Is it upregulating drainage or detox pathways in the body? And just trying to understand, okay, if it's clearly not killing a virus, what is it actually doing? Is it and so again, I know that's kind of going on a little different tangent from what we're supposed to be talking about, but I feel like that's an important concept to understand when it comes to really understanding viruses. And again, that distinction between exosome or a virus. So are the exosomes there because we've been exposed to different toxins? Is there overgrowth of bacteria? Is there overgrowth of parasites again that can release uh, these different exosomes as communication or to help with acting as a soap or a solvent to biodegrade the poison? So yeah, I know I kind of went on for a little different tangent there, um, but yeah.
Just one other thing to throw out there, and I thought this was like actually beautiful. Dr. Zach Bush, who is an amazing individual, he did a presentation a few years back, and and I'll link this in here as well because I think it's worth watching. It is 2 hours, but there's so much benefit and beauty in the words that he says. But the title of it was Virome, a template for a regenerative future. And one of the things that he shared about viruses is, in his opinion, they are genomic updates. And I heard that term, and I'm like, genomic update? What is that? I'm like, well, what's an update? An update for a computer is new information. It's going to help the computer work more effectively. It's going to help the computer so new programs are going to be able to be used with that versus if you're working on an old computer, they might not support that. And so perhaps these viruses are also communicating with our body in a way to give us information so our body is ready for something coming, something in the future that only the body can really identify, right? It doesn't come from man, it comes from like within. And I just thought that was an incredible, beautiful concept and important again to distinguish because these things are not to be feared. And I think that's maybe the biggest message of this is we do not need to live in a state of fear of a virus or a bacteria or a fungi, taking over and destroying us. We have to look further and identify what is dysregulated in our body that would allow these things to be present, that would allow these things to be in areas that they shouldn't be, right? Because clearly, staph and strep in certain parts of our body is fantastic. Staph and strep in our throat is not, right? E. coli in our colon is great. E. coli in our stomach is a disaster, right? So these things are not to be feared, but it's to recognize and find, okay, where's the imbalance? Where's the toxicity? Where's our disconnect with maybe the planet, with humanity, with ourselves, and then being able to come back into balance. And it's a lot of work, right? And this is what we're going to hit on in part two is the work needed to restore. And do we ever restore, or is it an ongoing process of supporting our system so that it's ready for toxin to come by, and then to give us the tools that we know exactly what to do or what things do we need to look at in order to support our body. So I think part two, if you're looking for the more practical side of things of what to do, then you're in store for a lot. Part two is going to be fantastic, which will not be, it'll be next week that will come out. But stay tuned for part two, because I think there will be a lot of great insight that you get into how to support your body on multiple levels.
Gonna leave everybody hanging for a week to learn the solutions.
That's right. So stick around, hang on. But again, the overall message, these things don't need to be feared, right? Life is beautiful. Our bodies, your body is incredible. It is by divine design, in my opinion, and it has everything in it it needs to thrive. Those things just need to be either unlocked or made to be able to express. And we're going to hit on how do we do that in part two. So, Dr. Nick, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up and bringing some awesome information that's going to definitely challenge some beliefs, maybe ruffle some feathers, make a few people like angry. These guys don't know what they're talking about. But, if you dig into it, you just begin to find things that, you know what, we're going to push against the narrative. And I don't know if this is actually true or not. Let's dig. Let's just not accept everything as truth the first, second, or even third time it's presented. Let's look behind the curtain and see what else is there. So thanks for being here. And until next time, keep it real. All right. I'll pause and then, actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to stop it and then I'll start it again. Are you good on time? Do you have another half hour?
Yeah. No.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom again. I shouldn't have drank a bunch of water.
Drink like a gallon of water today, huh?
Drink a big protein shake.